Hello, my dear friend, and welcome to the Spiritually Engineered Podcast, where we take a deep dive into the human experience from a spiritual perspective. Come on in, and I invite you to stay. All right, so one day, or very recently, I found myself needing to come back to something that has set an intention for the whole year. And that and I and it goes like this. It's like the phrase goes like have deliberate movement. And so the direction I wanted to go in this podcast episode is about goals and working with goals. How do you feel about goals? Whether it's just a concept of setting goals and reaching them or your own goals in life. This is important to consider, especially if you're someone that really wants more out of your own life. And that's great. And actually there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's important to want more out of life. I don't think that it's just like we need to just settle for or just be comfy with where we are. Although I'm sure some people are comfortable and that's their right. But like for myself, as someone who's understanding that I'm a soul having a human experience in this school, much like everyone else, I know and understanding that we all have a genuine desire to expand, to evolve. And so for me, it's like overcoming challenges and or just coming back to these goals is like setting little goals on related to projects and or day to day things, right? Um, this is an important thing because so much has been added to my life when I have worked with my goals in the past. But lately, I feel like I have been just moving like an autopilot. And I feel like when I've been doing some things, I've just been kind of getting caught up in the rhythms and routines, you know. And this is where I think it's important that the stability that we get that's provided by flowing through our routines and stuff is important. But it's like there has to be at points during the day where I take a step back and evaluate, which is something that I do. I take the time to regroup my day and I do it based on four simple questions. Before I actually had like a bunch of other questions, or it was just like made it too much of a tedious process. I was overthinking the whole process. But thanks to having went to a thanks to going to a program in Richmond when I saw my mentor, he kind of helped me simplify it. And it was so the questions I use is like, what are my accomplishments? What are my highlights? What did I learn today? And how can I improve? And then anything that doesn't fall into these areas, I have a section at the end. I add another part that I labeled notes. No, impressions and notes. So any ideas or thoughts or insights that I personally have, I'll add there. A little something I want to share with you if you happen to be looking for or wanted to refine your reflecting prompts of the day. Feel free to use some of those because that's something that's been actually pretty helpful so far. So, when it comes to working with goals, and I think even in general with many of us, we all work with goals conscious and unconsciously. But for me, I'm more about trying to like make it more of a conscious thing rather than just like, again, going back to what I said about autopilot, because I feel like I've just been kind of in some ways doing that and kind of defaulting to some stuff that I do where it's like I really want to make less time of. For example, like I feel like at this point, if you've been following me for this long, one of examples is like YouTube videos, like just or consuming something um, on the television or on the phone. It's just like less time of that and more time for myself to build. More time I'm recognizing to be creative, to actually make rather than consume. I don't know how you feel about goals, like I said, but for me, it's always been one of those things that I recognize what goals that I had set for myself, and when I have accomplished it, how fulfilling that's been. But then I also feel like there's moments when setting goals and stuff. I feel like I'm just like doing what I think I'm supposed to be doing, what others people are kind of, it's just like this outer thing. I'm not doing it for my own intentions, but rather what I think other people want me, like worrying about what other people think, if that makes sense. I feel like, I've had some tools and things that I've learned from like my group works, on my online little group works that I do, and they're great. Um, but for me, I need to remember, and it's something that even just like with the resources that that are shared, it's always this understanding that these are guidelines and they're not the end all be all. And so for me, it's like refining how I work with the goals, particularly with that I set for each month. Because I set some goals, but I always make sure to do like no more than five, because otherwise I'm just gonna overwhelm myself. Focus on five key areas, and like how I would have done it before is like I'll set five goals. Once towards the end of the month ends, and then I meet with my online virtual meditation group to reflect on the month and then set goals for the next. Oftentimes I find myself just kind of looking at where I fell short, where rather than like, oh, I did this, I did that. Although something I try to practice, but it's interesting how with goal setting, this perspective of the glass half empty comes up. Can you relate with that? And definitely something that I know that is an area of my life where I can put a lot of pressure on myself. I mean, shoot, I have days where I'm like looking at like, oh, why'd I do this? Like just yesterday, it's a good example. Um, I was watching on the television, like on there was a marathon of this awesome movie called John Wick. So I don't know if you ever heard of it. It's just an action movie about the main star Keanu Reeves, who just like he was like an assassin before, and then he retired, and then some dudes just like killed his uh his puppy, which was the remnants of his late of his wife who passed away. Although it wasn't, I don't remember exactly why she passed away, but she passed away. But she left it behind like a note and the puppy, and so the puppy represented a thing of hope for him. And then some goons and stuff, they crossed paths and something happened, and they pretty much uh, invaded his home, robbed him of his stuff, and killed his puppy. And then that really just sparked pretty much his arc, and he was just like where he came out of retirement as an assassin, as a contract assassin killer in this organization. That's international. And then he goes on this killing spree, and he uses like all this skills and just like pa, 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 all this like interesting choreography, but it's like action packed. It's pretty cool to watch how it's all plays out and stuff. And it has a very good story too. A lot of good characters, awesome cast, in my opinion. But anyway, that's just a little sharing on that. But I just spent like yesterday, uh, this past Sunday, just pretty much like I was watching the whole marathon from like because there's four of them, the chapter ones to four. Although as of time of recording this, there's another one that's coming out. That's gonna come out in June, in early June. So, and actually, I'm looking forward to seeing that one too. So, um, and so, so I spent the whole day just watching movies, just like on the couch in the living room and just watching. Although in the early parts of the days, I was actually coming in and out because I was doing like household chores and stuff like that. But then at some point when I was finished with all that, I was just like committed to just watching the rest of the movies as it was title after title. And along the way, I just thought about like, you know what? I know those thoughts of like, oh, you spent time watching movies all day when you could have done blah 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 blah. Blah. You could have done something else. Usually, when these not so constructive negative thoughts come up, they're just very vague and just like, oh, you should be doing something, or whereas like this is energy of like productivity for the sake of productivity, but it's like that's BS, and I feel like that's something society imposes on us. I don't know if you can relate, but definitely I can feel that because it's a lot of pressure. Like, dang, I can't go about my day without like be like my own worst teacher and like give myself like an F letter grade for like not doing this or that. Even though I've probably made some steps along the way, tiny steps that may not seem like much, but it's like even my guides would just be like, that's great. You're actually doing great so far. I remember from one of my online virtual meditation groups, one of the things that came up was like a passage I read. It was just like recognizing that I'm progressing or I'm growing, even though I may not see it around me. And it's true because we move at a gradual pace, right? We can't just go from A to B, zoom, boom, pa, fast. We experience life at a gradual pace. It's like those changes that slowly happen, much like aging, for example. And like recognizing even for myself in that area, like how my body's going through that stuff, much like everybody else at some point. Doesn't matter how old you are, you're all gonna. And one of the things that I remind myself, when I think about those fears of like growing old, or like, oh man, I hear stories about people growing old, or all of this, or these, or even societal concepts about old age and stuff like that. It's like, well, okay, yeah, well, it's part of the journey. It's part of the process. It's part of the a soul having a human experience. It's something that happens with the physical body. A big picture that I remind myself of. It's like, hey, everybody's gonna age at some point. Everybody, if they live long enough here, they're gonna age and their body's gonna, grow old. But you and I don't have to grow old, if that makes sense. You know, because this because it's about really keeping the childlike spirit. Something that you've had since childhood, since I know I've had, and something that I've worked on, and a lot of the things that I've recognized that it's important because when I'm just been healing my inner child, it's something I think is important, an important endeavor, and something to, and how I carry myself. It's like embodying that while also kind of showing forth, like, of course, like my maturity as I've through the years, through the wisdoms I've gathered and things like that. So there's no reason to be so hard on myself, and yet it still comes up. This is something that tells me that I know this. I'm working with a lot of things that are deeply rooted. When you find yourself dealing with something and you're encountering thoughts and feelings that seem to be a theme, and perhaps you may know better that they're not constructive, they're not doing you any service, any good. And if that's the case, I would say that perhaps it's something to consider, like how deeply rooted is all that stuff that you're experiencing. Looking at it from a big picture perspective rather than just like, oh, these one off, not one offs, but like, oh, this recurring thing, blah. Because I think by doing that, it really does give that perspective. And then again, I think the important thing is just to relieve pressure, relieve that pressure. Because again, we can only move as everybody moves through time at the same pace in terms of like we're all here in the present moment, right? We're all moving in the present moment in that regard, right? We don't live in the past, we don't live in the future. It's all about the present moment. And that has been something that I really wanted to fine tune and work more so on how I operating more in the present moment with my goals. And to give you a big picture perspective, you could say that you set a goal before even coming into this lifetime because you have been, and you always will be spirit, an eternal living life force. To give you that perspective, you had set perhaps a major life goal, and not that it's something very specific. It could be something like how you show up, right? Maybe part of like, I want to be compassionate towards many people. I want to be an example. I want to be a beacon of hope. I want to be an example that humanity is not truly lost. I want to be the one that goes against the status quo and be my own weird self. Like, just giving the naming examples here of like goals that even a lot of us, like, it's not like it's just one particular thing, mind you, but it's like we had set some intentions coming into the school, right? Much like how if you go to traditional school, like especially particularly college for sure, or high school, or school for that matter, like when you're applying and things like that, look back to that experience if you can relate. of just like looking for schools, and you have like these intentions. Okay, what do you want out of the school that you're applying to? You know, does it, like, let's say, does it offer like the major that you're looking for? What, or perhaps does it offer any extracurricular activities that interest you, that fascinates you? Looking at it from that perspective, and then kind of zooming back and looking at how it is with this giant school, Earth, here. So goals are definitely important because it definitely is the key ingredient to experiencing fulfillment. I believe, and like I said, and I mentioned this before, we all work with them consciously and unconsciously, but I think again, it's just like working with it consciously. Well, actually, let me take that step back and clarify here. Why would I say unconscious? Because think about it this way: when you wake up in the morning and you go to like when you go to the bathroom, it's like, or and then perhaps you brush your teeth or something, and then you do your business. That's like a goal you already set for yourself. Like immediately, okay, I'm coming out. I'm out of my bed. I'm back on Earth. Okay, let me go. Let me go use the bathroom. I need to take care of a need. Even like again, goals. Working with goals are simple. I find this is, and really the process is meant to be super simple. Depending on like if you have a particular project, then of course it's going to involve some more like breaking down, being more methodical about it. But on a day-to-day stuff, we work with goals all the time. Even in setting intentions to like eat, sleep, and all the things that are like our needs. Okay, we all actually set goals to fulfill our needs to make sure we fulfill them. Fulfillment. Fulfillment. Catch my drift? So we're working with it. So that's why I mentioned the whole whether conscious or unconscious. Because I feel like again, a lot of us, like myself included, can go through life where we're just like moving on autopilot, and we could be hitting goals and doing stuff, right? Being productive. But are they actually fulfilling? Productivity not for the sake of productivity for the sake of fulfillment. And I would say that if I just did one small action that moved me towards something that felt fulfilling, is way more better, and I do a lot more for myself than I have if I've been doing X, Y. Okay, I did all this stuff. I was busy today. Okay, that's nice. You're busy. But did you tackle the things that you deep down from your heart you needed to get done today? Yeah? No? Again, this is a very important thing here that I want you to consider for a moment and to distinguish. Because it's about honoring your relationship with yourself and honoring your own needs and wants. Not leave yourself out. Because I'm sure when you work with goals, oftentimes they can involve other people. But it's important not to forget what you're getting out of it, because you are on this school experiencing life like everybody else. And I think the sooner I believe you start, looking at it from that pivot, the more I think the more powerful relationships and more deeper connections you can make with other people that you can develop. And I'll add another layer here. Even like something else that I find where I kind of I put myself under a lot of pressure is recognizing that goals related to timing, the timing of my goals. Even like sometimes I'd have some challenges at work. When I handle a lot of things. My previous full time job working at a school, but for the most part, I think I did a good job because I definitely met a lot of the deadlines of a lot of things. So it's like I'm not terribly off or horrible. But I think when it comes to the timing of my own personal goals is where I feel a little bit pressured. Because it's like I think some part of me is like, oh, I don't know, I'm not sure, I don't know, and that's why for me it's just like I'm coming back to this of just like, okay, let me just work step by step. Like, yes, I have goals for the month, and sometimes I even set goals for like, which is something I started doing, of like the next couple, not like the next 6 months and stuff like that. You know, at the end of the day, it's like carry myself day in and day out, working with my goals and making sure that the targets I hit are the ones that are the important targets I need to hit at the best timing possible, and being aware of that. Like, if you're someone that we're not really sure about, when it comes to like your wants and needs, there's no reason to feel bad, because like I said, this, because I feel like for me, is like having that awareness and being aware of like what's the need for myself that I need to get, that I need to do right now. What's the next important step that I need to take. And that's something that I've been working a lot on, that I want to set that intention actually. And something that came up when I was, because I have a voice memo this as a note to myself for future reference. Something to make the whole goal setting process simpler, and also, which I think is equally as important, make it fun, make it easier to work with, is like instead of just like setting goals for the month, and then when I meet with my group, and then I'm like, okay, I evaluate and I get onto this thing, and then I set new goals and stuff. Because what I'll do is like I'll look at the 5 goals I had set, and then I'll completely set new goals, and then whatever I think I need to be doing at this time. And instead, how I'm approaching it this time is I'm gonna set no more than 5 goals, and when the end of the month and I'm in that transitionary period occurs, and I'm with my online meditation group, rather than just scrapping all the goals that I had set for myself, is rather just more so just checking in with each of those goals and feel like, okay, do I still have a feeling? Is there a desire? Is there a resonance with this goal still at this time? Or do I feel deep down that it's complete? So it's like, in some sense, you could say it's like I'm kind of recycling my goals from previous month to the next month. But it's like, but it could be the case that the goal that, which is the case for me, and maybe it could be for you, that the goal that I set for myself has been taking a long time. It's like a long term project kind of a thing. And so for me, I want to do way better in this area, so that I get back into that fun and adventure. How can I make working with goals an adventure? That's why I vote when I've seen like some productivity apps on the App Store, particularly in the iOS, which is the phone I use, the iPhone. I've seen some like developers made apps, productivity apps, like a game, and you actually get collectibles and things like that. Some kind of like basically creating a rewarding system. And I think that's such an important piece when it comes to working with goals. That helps reinforce the fulfillment and the enjoyment of the process. It's like rewarding yourself when you've reached an important step. Again, it doesn't have to be major, or you have to jump through loops and do a silly dance and do all this to get there. But like one small step taken today. Maybe you decided to kind of like take a break from your phone. You decided to maybe go for a walk outside and just enjoy the outside, or you took a moment to yourself and did a couple of breathing exercises. Maybe you decided to go to your journal and just make a note of something, or you want to just kind of reflect in that moment. Little tiny steps like that are like the important things that I think make a huge difference. And it's like I've definitely come to recognize and trust that when I've taken care of some goals, and when I felt like I've accomplished something small on a given day, it's like I can feel it, I can sense it, I can feel it, right? Our feelings are our barometers here. Our feeling nature, our feeling part, our intuitive part. Not the emotions, which is like communication per se, but the feeling part, our senses. Like, what do we feel? What do you feel? How do you feel? If this makes any type of sense. But it's like, okay, this feels good. And then for me, I get this imagery of like, there's a target in the distance, and then I just throw like a fireball. Like I just throw something, a projectile, and it just turns into a fireball, and and then it hits the target, and it creates like an area of effect, like boom, kind of like splash fire, like just kind of going everywhere. That kind of represents like in a different way of kind of even just of describing like the ripple effect, although it's a different imagery. at least something that I personally have had that to me has had a lot of meaning, and that's actually something that I put on my vision board for this year. And I find myself from time to time I'll see it in my mental picture, my vision part, my gift of vision, or I'll just like look at it physically because I made a graphic art out of it. So I'll look at that, and so I'll just look at that as a way of just giving me hope that everything's okay, I'm advancing, etc. And I have to remind myself again. Even like my guides will remind me. They'll give me chills to be like everything's all right. Like they see that everything's going. Like if something was going wrong, if I was like I don't know if the term is like regressing or anything like this, the opposite of progress. But if I'm like if I'm going in a direction that's not good, I trust that my guides would let me know. Like, hey, we need an intervention here. Something's you're not going in the best direction possible right now. Like we need to. It's like we don't need to sit down and talk. We need to just boom, Or sometimes like guidance will just work. Things will work out, and then like the universe will just pop. You know. Or for me, like my guidance will just hit me with the spiritual 2x4 to be like, oh shoot, okay. Where in which case it's like it's those moments that like I'm experiencing now of just like to pause and slow down. Pause and slow down. Because like if you're frantic and then trying to go on autopilot like myself, like all this energy, then it's just like all right, it's not gonna go anywhere. And I'll find myself very often kind of going in circles. So so again, all of this trying to work with goals better, taking it one step at a time, and then just gathering a lot of like my thoughts, looking at my journals and things, and just getting a sense of okay, what's been coming up for me, so that the goals that I set for myself are based on like the areas in my life that where I can see some challenges and some areas of growth. That's why I see the value of like when I journal. I write down things wherever like with the tools I got because it's good feedback. It's good feedback where you can build your goals around. It's like if you find yourself, dealing with a particular person or maybe your mornings are always rough and it's like, oh man, I always seem to be late and I'm always like, oh, this, that. And if it's something that you come to the awareness, then that's right. Okay, let me set the goal of having my morning routine smoother. Does that make sense of that process that I just outlined there? Just a simple example, but again, it's like whatever you're kind of dealing with, and never judge it. It's like a lot of things that you might be experiencing. There are a lot of opportunities. Anything that stimulates you, anything that kind of you feel even a little bit of challenge. It doesn't have to be like extreme, right? It's good notes. It's good data, if you will. It's good information to work with. Okay, so and then set some goals to help address that particular area. And so with the goals that I'm setting, or at least reorienting myself that I'm doing right now, one of the things I'm always checking is to make sure is like, do I have a feeling for it? Like whatever goals you have, or if you're going to set a goal, it's important to check to see if you have a feeling for it. And you might think, well, what do you mean by that? It doesn't necessarily mean you have to have an emotion tied to it per se, necessarily. But it's like what you could do as an exercise is say you identified a goal and you're checking to see if you have a feeling for it. What I would suggest is like close your eyes and imagine, and you could do this in like in a sitting lotus or in a comfortable position in your own room or your own space, and just imagine for a moment what would it feel like when you've accomplished that particular goal that you're thinking about. And this is where you can use your imagination and play around with it. Play around with the idea. Just use your imaginary, your visual gift, your gift of vision. Use that sense, or even like your gift of intuition, that clear hearing to get like all the what do you hear, what do you see. You might even that inner smell, like with those inner like spiritual senses, the extrasensory perception. Like as you're like imagining, you accomplishing a particular goal or goals, what does it feel like? What do you observe? And if there's something that, if you even get an ounce of fulfillment, or if you get an ounce of feel good, and hey, maybe you might feel some emotion, maybe you might feel some joy, or perhaps you might not feel anything, like I don't know. Then it's something that either you could either a put that goal off aside and put on the mental shelf, or b discard it altogether and then just play around with new goals. And again, I feel like with this goal, with this process of like goal setting and stuff that I want to do better in, it's just like make it a game. Just play around with it. And I think the important thing in that process is just to work one step at a time, work little by little, and not like I have to run a marathon in one day in order to even feel like you did anything. Because I know for me, I think also it kind of ties into like my sense of self worth. Like I'm only as worthy as how productive I am. You know, it's almost. I even think about like relationships. For example, I see some people who like have these criteria, like they gotta contribute something, or they have to basically prove themselves in relationships, and that's not something that I particularly want. Like I know when it comes, like, and I'm speaking here of like romantic relationships here. Yeah, I know when it comes to romantic relationships, like each person has to do their part, and of course that comes through communication and working things out, and just like um, working through any compromises and stuff like that, and all that's important. But I think it's like, again, it's like there's no need to have to prove. There's no need to have to prove, because I wouldn't want to be in that kind of relationship where I have to prove myself based on on what I do. I mean, I guess you say like, is our and actions define us? Maybe in some sense, but is it the end all be all? I don't know. I think for me, I guess why I mentioned that is because of the theme of like unrealistic expectations, and I'm speaking for myself that I can impose on myself is where I get myself. Again, this is like an area of my life where I put a lot of pressure on myself, and I get these influences, and I pick up things in the environment, societies, these their ideas and things like that, and it's just like, no, let me just be, right. Let me not allow these ideas to think that I'm broken or something, or because that's what I feel like it communicates. Like you have to be a contributing member of society, blah blah blah, blah, or you're worthless or something. I don't know if you ever heard that, or perhaps, I mean, I hope no one would ever have told you that, but that's like messed up. So I think there's this theme of like worth that comes up, at least for me. I don't know if you can relate to this at all. Again, that's that energy of productivity for the sake of productivity. That's BS. I'm sorry, that's bullshit. I'm not gonna buy into that. That's not how I want to carry myself. If I'm doing things throughout the day with the goals that I work with that I set for myself, is for the purpose of my own personal fulfillment. Because that's how I keep my cup full. And that's how I can show up better. I can show up my best self with other people, be it loved ones, friends, acquaintances, colleagues, etc. So, yeah, like this working with goals thing doesn't have to be complicated, doesn't have to be so serious. It's important to have some serious, a little bit of it, but not make it too serious. There's got to be some fun in there too. Again, I feel like I'm kind of going back in circles here, but I feel like it bears repeating. I generally feel like it does bear repeating, and so I hope at this point, I've given you something to think about, particularly with like, how you feel about goals at this point. I asked you that question before. How do you feel about goals and setting goals or your own goals? And I'll ask you again after hearing what I've just shared. How do you feel about goals and goal setting now? How do you feel about your own personal goals? As long as you're taking a step, even if it's that 1% progress, right? There's a saying, by the inch is a cinch, by the yard, it's hard. It's not about trying to go fast or rush to see how you can, or this idea that there's a got a race, because I think that's another a common element. I think that definitely influences me and how I feel about my how I carry myself. There's like this delusional concept that there's this idea that people are ahead or behind in life. That's bullshit too. Who's to say that you're ahead or behind in life? Think about that for a moment. Who has the power to say you're ahead or behind? When you have your own life, you are your own leader to begin with. And whatever people say, that's their opinion, by the way. No reason to take that to heart. Like, thanks for sharing your opinion, but I'm just doing me. What you're doing is enough. And I know my guides remind me countless times, and I felt it. And I'm sure your guides feel the same way. So I think, what's coming out of all this is just like, I remember a Facebook post I saw where it was like, you can't shame yourself, you can't force yourself to evolve, but rather you can love yourself into evolution. So yes, we're all here in the school, we're all learning and things like that. I mean, but we're also here to have fun in this playground as well. And who's to say we can't have fun while also learning and growing? Who says those two things can't happen? Because I believe it. I've experienced it countless times. Countless times. And so, even just setting, let's say if you didn't have a goal, right, at this point in the episode, but if you set even just one small goal that feels good to you, that feels right for you, that's all. That's all. You're already in the right track. You're already in the right track. So it's definitely important to just remember, distinguish that the goals are there goals that you want or you think, or are there goals that you're setting because you think that's what other people want you to do, or something that's expected from outside. So it's like working with goals from within rather than the external. You have your life to live. You're the leader of your life. I have my life to live. I am the leader of my life. And I want to take more of that and let go of the garbage and shit that I've picked up from other people along the way. Thanks for the opportunity, but I don't need this anymore. This belongs to you. This is an interesting technique that I did that was kind of like, there's like some words to say. It was like a little very interesting, powerful technique. That was part of it. It's like, hey, this belongs to you. I don't need it. It doesn't serve me at all. And so, one more thing I also wanted to add that I had put here in my notes here, some key points as well. Why I think working with goals is important, especially because if you know you're working with goals that feels good to you, that you checked it, like, yeah, no, I have a feeling for this. This is my soul, true heart's desire, goals, like I'm working towards, right? It can also protect you from FOMO, and that's another reason why I've kind of in this process of like this little minor, small little intervention with myself of what I've been kind of working through right now, because I find myself getting caught up in the FOMO, getting caught up in all that energy out there, all that wacky, crazy current out there. But it's like, I have my life. I need to lead it. I need to live it because no one's going to do it for me. And it's like, and I didn't come here to experience, other people's stuff or get involved in all these things, but just for rather what I need and want. So kind of coming back to that, wants and needs. Your soul wants and needs. Your true heart's desires. So like working with those goals can help you feel um, more resistant. You have more resistance to the distractions and things that can come up. And that doesn't say that it won't happen. I mean, it may happen, but if you care and have a lot of energy put into your goals and really get and dialing in that feeling, very important distinction there. When you can dial into that feeling and bring it back as a reminder, like, oh, I need to get this goal. I remember how how it felt like when I accomplished it. It's like that, having that desire to it, to get it, to reach it. That can help you pivot. So when you get distracted or get sidetracked by something, which may happen, it's like that resilience coming back. Nope, let me come back. Oh, what's this? Oh, I don't need to be part of this. What's going on here? And setting that intention to, like, really be involved in things that nourish you, that you get something out of it, rather than like being that person that's like, why am I here? Although that's a good actually situation to be in, though, because if you catch yourself and you do ask that question, like, why am I here? Oh, that's like, hold on, pivot, pivot, pivot. Not where I need to be right now. I kind of got dragged into it. It's awareness, my friend. It really, I mean, the more you start to recognize and do this inner work and just being aware of, like, where you find yourself going and things like that. I mean, it's just sometimes I just laugh at myself and I just like palm to my face, like, bro, oh, jeez. But at least catching yourself is a game changer itself. When you can catch yourself and involved in something, and it's like, oh wait, I'm getting sidetracked from a goal that I set for myself, whatever that is, right? Again, it's a small goal, nothing crazy or big. It just coming back. And so, and I'll add this to finally wrap this up. It's like, and it's not necessarily about what the goals are, at least for me. In some sense, too, it's like, it's not necessarily about what the goals are, but it's about how I work with them. So that's another piece as well, too. Even though I do believe that, again, like, what are the goals, they are important. But again, it's just like kind of giving you the nuances here, the different layers of this, of like, where I'm at, where's Alvin at this time? At least at the time of recording this podcast episode. And I'm sure down the line I'll share some new insights and stuff I get along the way too, and I'll definitely share it with you if you stick around long enough. If you stick with me, I trust that you'll get something out of it if you haven't already. So stay tuned. So yeah, I think so that's all this to say. I want to have more deliberate movement and not allow myself to just be moved by the outer current or other people's stuff, because everybody's got their ish. There's so much going on out there, but it's like, you and I don't got to be caught up in all that ish. We don't have to be caught up in all that. There's that choice. And so I want to have that more deliberate movement, something that I had set the intention for myself for this year. And I'm coming back to it and I'm honoring it. And as I'm working through the times where I do feel overwhelmed, it's like, you know what? Step by step, baby. Let's take it tiny step by step, relishing in those moments where where I've fulfilled some goals. Oh, I did this, and really feeling it like, right? Celebrating them, honoring them. And then it's like, all right, let's keep it going. Again, just having fun with it, just tapping into, like, my own inner child, how I would tackle it. Like, what would the inner child me work with all this? How would he approach it? Because I think because that also is it's I would imagine how our guides, our spirit guides are, because it's been said that they're like very wise children, a perfect, I think, really good models of how to live a life of balance, joy, abundance, and all the positive things. And I think they have they definitely have been, and they probably will teach me a lot more about when it comes to, like, working with goals and things like that. You know, I'm pretty sure I'll learn more. So I hope that perhaps, for yourself, you can have some more concern about your own deliberate movement and how you carry yourself day to day. Less autopilot, more conscious living, conscious engagement, embracing the present moment, working with balance, the past and the future. The past where we draw the wisdom, the future where we plan and set our energy where we want to go. Kind of projecting, using our own inner leadership to say, hey, I want to move towards this. I want this out of my life. Kind of having that sense of clarity within. So, if you made it this point into the episode, I appreciate it so much. I mean, this has been a jam-packed one for sure. Even just being the one sharing this with you, I can just feel like it's a lot. So, like, just take one small thing, anything that stands out. You ain't gotta get it all figured out or get the whole thing. It's just something small that stood out to you is just all that's needed. And so, I guess if there's anything that stood out to you, if it's just one thing, I know I've done my part, and I trust that you'll work with it in the way that you need to for yourself. And I support and back that all the way. And so this has been another episode of Spirit Engineered. I'm your host, Alan Cepeda, signing out. And as always, take care, my dear friend.